I am 33 years old. I had a serious drinking problem since a young age. My dad was an alcoholic, so booze never lacked in our house. It nearly killed me when I was only 27 and was in the for alcohol poisoning. It was too close a call, and after that things had to change. With my wife's support, I went to rehab and proud to say I've been sober 51//2 YRS. My flatmate invited our friends over yesterday. It was 7 of us in total, including his friend, Mark. I've met Mark maybe 3 to 4 times over the last 2 years, and while we're friendly, I honestly don't know him that well. But you can tell he's a party guy. Likes to get loud, take shots, makes gross comments sometimes, etc. Mark brought several cases of beer and a bottle of tequila with him, so everyone was drinking and having a good time. Mark kept offering me drinks the entire night, which I'd politely decline. It's like he made it his personal mission to get me to drink by egging me on. Saying every time he sees me I'm either drinking a soda//water and it's okay to let loose sometimes. He resorted to teasing me into drinking, calling me princess. I don't know what that had to do with not wanting to drink. All my friends there knew what I was like before, how bad my drinking was, so they kept trying to steer the conversation so he'd forget about me. But every now and then he'd hand me a shot glass or a beer and would not let it go even after telling him yet again that I didn't want to drink. My wife became uncomfortable with his behavior. I think she was worried I'd actually drink. She grabbed the shot glass from me, dumped it in the sink, and told him to stop it already. He looked between us and grinned like he understood now. Mark joked that maybe we should get my wife drunk first, then that'll get her to loosen up the leash she has on me. I'll admit, that made me see red. I got in his face and told him, actually I don't drink because last time I did I almost King died, so unless you want me puking everywhere and having seizures you should shut up and leave my wife out of this. Wiped the smile off him real quick and he apologized. The rest of night went on and he finally left me alone. Our flatmate did confront me in the morning because he thinks I was too honest with Mark, and it wasn't his fault, he didn't know. He was just joking around and I made him feel bad. Our other friends agree he was being too pushy and deserved being told off. My wife agrees, so he's the only one right now that's taking Mark's side. He said I could have ignored him until he gave up instead of bringing up an uncomfortable truth from my past. Now yes, I could have just told Mark the truth without full details, but felt that's none of his business and a no should have been enough. I only got carried away when he decided to include my wife in his jokes. So yes, I am wondering if I was a bit of an a-hole for what I told him instead of keeping the peace. My son Simon, he is 16, moved out of the room he used to share with his little brother and got his own room a few months back. Ever since, he's been complaining about his mom barging in without knocking and interrupting his sleep and studying. Sometimes when he's changing. I know that she's his mother, but he says he's got his own room and has a job and is learning to become an independent adult, but doesn't feel like his privacy is being respected even when that's his mom. He says he's not a kid anymore and is entitled to at least get a knock on the door before she comes in. He was getting tired of her not listening to him, so he came to me and said, "Dad, you need to help me set some clear boundaries with Mom." So I spoke to her about her need to knock before entering Simon's room. She was like, "What? And no, we're family, not strangers. Do you really expect me to foolishly knock on the door 5 times a day? That's ridiculous. Also, the knocks doors in their own home?" I told her my family, for instance. She made a face, then went on a rant about how my family hate each other's and the way they treat each other's like they were strangers is shameful. I told her family or strangers, it's about respecting one's privacy. We had an argument about it and I told her if she wasn't going to stop with the barging and refuse to knock on the door before entering, then our son will get a lock. She did it again at 11 p.m. She barged in when our son was asleep. He jumped up because he got scared. Once he told me this, I told him to go ahead and get a lock and pay for it with his own money. There was literally no other way. My wife saw it and got upset, and my brother was visiting when she was raising her voice at me if I really went ahead and got a lock for Simon despite her disapproval, and said that I caught her off guard and it's not okay. Because this teaches our children that they can manipulate one parent into doing what they want. I told her that Simon got the lock, not me, and I already warned her about the possibility of him getting a lock because he was getting tired of her boundary crossing. So she should have expected this outcome. She mentioned the same above points in her defense and said locks mean secrets and that's not good. My brother was sitting watching while she was complaining. She began chewing him out when he asked her to let Simon keep the lock and said it wasn't a big deal. She stopped talking to me and Simon till we removed the lock, but I've no intentions on doing that. I have a large family. Mostly aunts and female cousins aside from mom, stepmom, stepsister and grandmother. I don't know how to say this, but all those women I mentioned above are into teasing and joking. They've formed a unit, which I admit is kind of toxic. And they'd tease and roast every new woman that enters the family by marriage by setting up tests to see if they deserve to be part of the family, or roast their looks and styles to the point of breaking confidence and self-esteem down. Then after a few months of teasing they'd announce that they've finally welcomed them into the family. The newest member would join in on the teasing too, which is crazy as my dad says. When I first introduced my then girlfriend now wife, I made it clear that I didn't want any of the women in the unit to come at her or harass her, not even with a single word. They went behind my back and roasted her looks and job, and I discovered they've been doing it on Facebook. I had them apologize one by one after they gave the "we're just testing the water to see if she's capable to be part of the family" excuse. They didn't want to apologize, but once I said I wouldn't invite any of the unit unless they apologize, including my mom, everyone immediately apologized and brought gifts for my wife. My wedding was 2 weeks ago. There was talk about the women in the family wanting to pull a prank on my wife by wearing white and called it the ultimate test to see how my wife react. My brother warned me, so I announced that if any one of them showed up in white I'd have them kicked out, including mom. They said this wasn't true and they'd never do such thing. But they showed up to my wedding one by one wearing white dresses, and each and every one of them was told to leave after they tried giving excuses by either making scenes or getting the men involved. The senior women of the unit, who are mom and aunts, also showed up in white but refused to leave. I threatened to take harsher action and mom was pissed, telling me to step aside, but I didn't let her in. I had her leave while the men in the family were watching stunned. Dad was on my side and supported me a lot. I felt absolutely awful because my wedding was being interrupted by them making scenes. My wife was hurt beyond measure, but the women in the family were pissed. My cousin blasted me on social media later, saying I excluded all the women from the wedding because my wife was so insecure she couldn't handle another woman's presence at her wedding. I had an argument with them and mom berated me, saying it was supposed to be a prank, but I said they were taking it too far. Mom said I took it too far by kicking them out because they were trying to get reaction from my wife to see if she was one of those Bridzillas and were going to change soon as prank was over, but I ruined my own and entire wedding by reacting so aggressively. I stopped talking after she said I had to bring my wife and apologize. I haven't seen the lot of them in 2 weeks and they've excluded me from everything. I just want to explain that, this has been happening for years. The men in the family are split on this behavior. Some of them encourage it, like my uncle and my cousin's husbands. One is now an ex, and some are against it like me and my dad and brother. The women claim that there's nothing hurtful in what they do because they claim they're just looking out for us men, and that their goal, ultimately, is to make sure the women who enter the family are decent. My dad always ends up arguing with my mom and grandmother, since they're the ones who started this whole thing with their behavior and attitude towards other women. And I'm not sure if I should mention this, but my male cousin, who's a middle schooler, said he'd make sure to leave the country before even meeting any woman because of this, and it made me chuckle. Also, the dresses they showed up in were simple white dresses, nothing over the top, but still were white dresses. I realized they went ahead with their plans even after I stated what I'd do in that case. My husband Derek and I have been married for 3 years, together for 7 total. Several years ago, about 6 now, I guess, I worked closely with a male coworker, Paul, that Derek was never fond of. Paul and I never had an inappropriate relationship. Derek's jealousy wasn't completely out of nowhere. I get why he felt that way. Those couple years were a perfect storm of relationship stress. I was working long hours. We were living apart after trying and failing to move in together. Our relationship was still fairly new. And then you add in a handsome coworker I had to spend long hours with and saw more than my boyfriend at the time. Paul was the source of several fights. Again, we never did anything that wasn't completely kosher. Eventually, I told Derek he needed to trust me and get over it, or we were going to have to break up. He said he would stop worrying, and for the most part things were good. When Paul transferred out of state a few months later, things were really good. There were no worries at all, and our relationship has been amazingly strong ever since. This last weekend, my husband went out with a couple friends to some bars and a football game. When he came home, he was pretty wasted. We talked for a bit, and he mentioned how a friend of his had told him that he broke up with his girlfriend because she cheated on him. I commented on how that was a bummer and good for him for finding out before they got too serious. Derek, however, had a different take on it. He said it was a shame because they had seemed like a good couple, and if they really loved each other, his friend could move past the cheating. Just like he had with me. At first I thought my husband was admitting to cheating on me, and asked him what he meant. He told me he always knew that Paul and I had slept together at least once all those years ago. But he knew I was the one for him and forgave me. I told Derek that I had never so much as even hugged Paul, except maybe at his going away party, let alone slept with him. Derek sort of just patted me on the arm, said of course, and passed out. The next morning I asked him about the conversation and he said it was okay, he had forgiven me, it wasn't even an issue. I again stressed that I had never cheated on him with anybody and I needed him to believe me. He sort of did the same, of course you didn't, babe wink thing again, and went to work. Every time I've tried to talk to him since, he won't hear me out. I'm this close to losing it with him. I need him to know that I never cheated, and I'm hurt that he thinks I would do something like that. What do I do? Do I just let him have this since it's not really hurting anything, or what? I don't want my own husband to think so little of me that he thinks I would cheat. That's not who I am.